I
When I
started
was
driving
just
for
7
Uber to
years
make
old,
ends meet.
I didn't
I
yet
was laid off from
understand
my
the
retail
stress
job and
my
needed quick
parents were
income.
carrying on
The
their
thing about
shoulders.
rideshare gigs is you
The
see
weight
all kinds
of
of people,
working 2
especially when
jobs,
you're working late.
each just to keep us fed. We had before. She was in tea cold, or bored, or lazy. She was fun, upbeat, full of energy, cooked simple meals, played endless games. My parents decided that Michelle had done more than enough and
Sat there for a
deserved
minute,
a
too
real
shaken to
break.
move.
My
Eventually, I
parents
drove home,
didn't
constantly checking my mirrors.
have time to look for
When I
a
got
new
home,
sitter,
I looked at the trip
and
details
with
again.
work not
Something was
slowing
off.
down,
The name had
they
changed.
made the decision
It no longer
to drop
said
Cam
Derek.
and me off with our grandparents, who lived deep in the quiet, open countryside of Texas, and even a few cows. And the place smelled like fresh grass and warm food and wood smoke all at once. We played with their dog, Cora, a loyal mutt with bright eyes and soft fur. Then Cam and I
He said,
settled
"Yeah, that's right,"
into the
in a
bunk
quiet,
beds
calm voice.
in our shared room.
I remember thinking he
When
sounded
the
a little
world
off.
outside
Not drunk or
was
high,
dead
just
silent,
sort of flat,
and the glow
emotionless.
from the TV
But I didn't think too
cast
hard about it at the time.
strange shadows
I
on the
started
ceiling.
driving, and he
I
didn't
woke
say
up
anything for the
to a sound I didn't understand at first. Not loud, but heavy, slow. Steady footsteps passing by just outside our bedroom window. Cartoons playing softly in the background as the night darkened outside. Something comforting and earthy that made me feel strangely safe. They checked the outside, but
or have
when
a
they
silent
didn't
passenger
see
in the back
anyone
seat. I
or
remember that night,
anything,
and I remember
they
that
just
feeling
kissed
that
my
something
forehead,
terrible could have happened.
told me
That maybe he
to
changed
go
his
back
mind
to
at the
bed,
last second,
bringing
or maybe he was
Cora
never planning to do
along
anything,
on
just
her
wanted to
leash.
scare someone.
A leash
But I still wonder.
I begged to hold, excited to lead her through the field like a grown-up, and turned off the hall light behind them. Fell asleep quickly in the room next to ours, unsure whether I should scream or stay quiet, unsure whether I was dreaming or awake. But when I turned to tell Grandpa, he and Cam were already a good 15 feet ahead of me,
After a few
laughing
seconds,
and
he told me to
unaware,
drive to where I picked him up.
staring
I didn't
at
want to
the
argue
ceiling
anymore,
and
so I started
listening
heading back toward the
with
strip
both
mall.
hands pressed
The
against
whole way
the
there,
trunk
I felt this
and
pressure
his
in the
head,
car.
leaning
He wasn't
out
talking, but I could
just
feel him
enough
watching me.
that I could
The
tell
hairs on my arms
he
were
was
standing
watching
up.
us,
He was
not
still staring.
moving, not blinking, just staring. But the sounds didn't come back, and eventually, after what felt like forever, I drifted back into a shallow, uneasy sleep, leaving Cam and me to do what siblings do. Whisper, giggle, the kind of breakfast only grandparents know how to make. And after we ate, we waved goodbye to our parents as they packed the car and headed home, leaving us in the care of Grandma and Grandpa for the summer, and pretend not to be tired until the screen lulled us to sleep. So they let her go off to enjoy her summer vacation. But then she started stopping altogether, resisting the leash every few steps, her head locked in one direction, ears perked, body stiff. Didn't he stir at all? The soft volume of the TV probably masking everything. And when I followed her gaze into the woods beyond the fence, I saw a man. So I did the only thing I could think of. I tiptoed across the hall and woke my parents, whispering that someone was trying to open our window, promising she'd be welcomed back in the fall if she wanted, and never made us feel like a burden or a job she had to finish. To us, she was family, and the way she laughed and played with us made us feel like we weren't just being watched, but actually cared for. So I couldn't see who or what was out there, followed by a low grunt, like someone was gripping the window frame, jiggling it, trying to open it from the outside. And suddenly, I wasn't tired anymore. I was wide awake and full of fear I didn't know how to explain. But the way the footsteps paused right beneath the window made my breath catch in my throat and my whole body go still. We packed up and took a long drive across fields, and although the scenery was beautiful in that calm, endless way that only country landscapes can be. Of course, not fully. They told me it was probably just a raccoon or an animal brushing up against the house. The kind of thing you're bound to hear in the middle of nowhere, especially with woods so close. To my young mind, the drive felt like it stretched on forever, clothed and safe, and over the next few months, she became not just our babysitter, but a kind of big sister figure who made our afternoons something we looked forward to. And though they tried to shield me from it, the truth was they were gone more than they were home. Because of that hectic schedule and the fact that my brother Cam and I were both still young and couldn't be left alone, they found a babysitter online, a girl in her early 20s named Michelle, who instantly felt like sunshine when she walked through the door. Michelle was, in tea, like any of the other sitters. Cam and I, only a year apart in age, quickly grew attached to her. She helped us with our online classes when our parents couldn't be there. But when the school year ended and summer rolled around, without Michelle around, leaving our home in Oklahoma, finally, when we pulled up to their home, a warm, wooden cabin-style house nestled in a huge, grassy clearing with woods on one side and a weathered old barn off in the distance. It felt like we'd arrived at another world, far removed from the city, the noise, and the internet. It wasn't just the house that made the place special. There were fenced-in animals like goats, chickens, that first night after hugging Grandma and Grandpa and eating a dinner that tasted like love itself. My parents, exhausted from the drive and needing to return home for work early the next morning. But some time passed, 2 in the morning. The blinds were closed tightly. Then came a soft, metallic sound. Come a deep sleeper by nature. They didn't believe me, still. To calm me down and prove their point, the next morning smelled like pancakes and fresh eggs. Later that day, Grandpa took us out to feed the animals and walk the trail around the back of the house. She pulled a little at first, curious and sniffing everything. I bent down to see what had caught her attention. He was tall, dressed all in black, half hidden behind a tree. I froze where I stood, feeling my chest tighten. By the time I turned back to point, the man was gone, completely vanished into the trees. Not a sound, and though he smiled gently and said it was probably just a deer in the distance, and the rest of the day passed in the blur of movies, snacks, and sprinkler games on the lawn. But no matter how much fun I tried to have, the image of that man, his stillness, his stare, stayed lodged in the back of my mind. Not a branch snapped, not a shadow left behind to prove he was ever there at all. Not knocking, but humming. Climbed into our bunk beds and fell asleep to the sounds of cartoons again, the comforting light of the screen flickering against the walls as I slowly dozed off. I told Grandpa what I saw. We went back inside after another big dinner and a warm bath. Cam and I returned to our room. But too smooth, too practiced. Hey, it's Grandpa. And though I was still half asleep, something in the way he walked, but smooth, young, firm. And I realized it didn't belong to my grandfather at all. And more than anything, I saw the long wooden handle of an axe sticking up from the waistband of his pants. In the way he didn't say anything else started to feel wrong. I heard the real Grandpa's voice call out from the porch, distant but clear, "Kid." And I saw his profile under the moonlight, unfamiliar, pale, wrong, but with every ounce of fear and force in my little body, and began backing away. "You okay?" Stumbling up the steps into Grandpa's arms as Grandma stood on the phone with the police, her hands shaking. Then suddenly turned and sprinted into the woods, like a shadow melting into the trees, vanishing without a sound. "Come out here, kid. I want to show you something cool." Gently, like they were mimicking the melody through the glass. But then I woke up. Stupidly, that maybe it was Grandpa just outside on a late-night walk, playing a harmless joke or being weirdly playful. And after a sweep of the nearby area, they found him, hiding in a ditch not far from the barn, and that if he had me, she'd do whatever he asked, that we could all be a family again. My breath caught in my chest, which now had a broken lock. And yes, they found the axe, the one I'd seen strapped to his back, and stared at the closed blinds, knowing without a doubt that whoever was out there was not a random passerby. They were there for me, but to use me as leverage against Michelle, to force her to come back to him. And walked toward the window where the figure waited, standing just beyond the porch light's reach, holding out a hand for me to take. Around 1 a.m., I heard it. Not footsteps this time. Someone outside the window was humming the theme song to the cartoon we'd been watching. Slowly, I sat up in bed. Still, for some reason, perhaps out of sleepiness or confusion, I assumed, so I called out, softly but clearly, "Grandpa." The humming stopped instantly. Dead silence outside. Then, a moment later, I heard a voice respond. Low and quiet. Something in me hesitated. But the voice was calm, familiar, patient. I slipped on my shoes, crept outside into the cool, quiet darkness. I took it. He began leading me slowly toward the barn. Hand in hand, I looked down at his hand, not wrinkled or aged like Grandpa's. Then I noticed the baggy dark sweater, the hood pulled tightly over his head. At that exact moment, like fate stepping in, the man holding my hand tensed, turned his head slowly toward the voice. That was when I pulled my hand free. Not slowly. The man didn't chase me. He just stood there, breathing heavy. I ran back to the house screaming, crying. The cops came fast, lights flashing against the trees. Inside the ditch was a stash of tools and equipment he'd stolen from the shed. Later, we found out who he was. His name was Dave. He was Michelle's ex-boyfriend. And for weeks, he had been watching us. He admitted that he planned to kidnap me. Not to hurt me, he claimed. He said he thought she loved me, but I don't care what he said he wanted. He waited outside my window. He faked my grandpa's voice. He held an axe. And I know exactly what would have happened if Grandpa hadn't woken up that night. I'm 16 now and living in the city. But for the first 8 years of my life, everyone waved at each other, and we kids could even memorize the car plates and who they belonged to just by habit. Where the population never crossed 90 and everyone knew everyone else like family. It was the kind of place where kids were allowed to roam free without much worry. No one locked their doors. Frying our faces and soaking our clothes in sweat as we scoured the edges of fields, ditches, and fences looking for mint. But after nearly an hour, we had barely filled half of one bag. So, if we could fill 2 big plastic bags with mint leaves from around the village, she'd happily buy us all the soda we could drink. And they never pulled them back. But their voices were oddly soft, overly friendly. Are you kids out here all by yourselves? One I didn't recognize at the time, trying to signal me to leave, to walk away. The way someone might speak to a child to earn trust, like they were pleased to hear that we were tired, thirsty, and looking for something far from the village. One blazing hot summer day, my best friend Julian and I were wandering the village roads. And that's when Julian stepped forward, pulling me back by the arm with an urgency in his face that made it clear he wasn't comfortable at all. Yeah, we're just looking for mint plants, and then asked if they knew where we could find a whole bunch. Dying for a cold can of Coca-Cola, but neither of us had even a single coin between us, and there was no way I was going to ask my parents for money. That S when an old lady, one we both recognized, called out to us from her porch, smiling warmly and asking if we could help her out with something in exchange for whatever soda we wanted. She told us she was preparing mint tea for her upcoming birthday and had run out of fresh mint. Julian and I thought it was a brilliant deal. No chores, just plant hunting. So we grabbed the bags and headed out right away, not realizing how difficult that task would turn out to be. And as the shadows stretched long on the ground, like they had been waiting for us, but to our 7-year-old eyes, they looked like giants, taller than us by a foot or more, and dressed all in black, with big hoodies and tight pants despite the summer heat. Even though we hadn't seen anyone coming for miles, we started to realize there was no way we were going to finish before sunset. Not unless something lucky happened. The sun was merciless. We were growing frustrated and tired. That's when, as if on cue, 2 older boys suddenly appeared, and I mean appeared, right there on the dirt path. They weren't adults. Maybe 15 or 16 at most. What unsettled me the most was how hard it was to see their faces clearly. The hoods cast deep shadows. One of them tilted his head and asked. Julian glanced at me nervously and made a subtle hand motion, but I didn't pick up on it. In my naive, cheerful way, I told the strangers at that moment, I swear I saw a grin flicker across one of their faces. The one standing closest crouched beside me and lightly patted my head. He asked the 2 strangers, "Who are your parents in our small village?" That wasn't tea, just a question. It was a way of knowing whether someone belonged there or not. Because nearly every family had lived there for generations, and people knew each other by last name more than first. They didn't answer. They just looked back at me like I was the one they were focused on. Then the second guy, the quieter one, suddenly said, "Actually, we just came from a hill nearby. There is a huge patch of mint up there if you want. A place we kids used to explore and play hide-and-seek in when the grown-ups weren't watching. But I had never seen any mint growing there, ever. We can take you." Now, I knew that hill. It was a steep, little forested slope behind the village. Still, I was too stupid to question it. I smiled and nodded, and I swear I didn't even think. My legs just moved, tugging on Julian's arm, then cursing, then chasing. Their footsteps crashing through the underbrush as they ran after us, and for those next few minutes, our lungs burning, and the old woman who sent us out stood frozen on her porch as we collapsed at her feet, never letting go of each other's hands, not once looking back, and asked what had happened. And Julian, still panting, lied. It felt like I was flying, leading us slowly toward the edge of the village, that it was his idea, his mistake. Heart pounding louder with each breath. Had we hesitated for just one more minute, I might not be here telling this story at all. And that S, when I truly realized something wasn't T right. That if we didn't turn back, and for a month, he wasn't allowed to go outside and play. Now, we might not be able to turn back at all, or how long they had been watching us, farther and farther from the familiar dirt roads and small houses. I can guess what they were trying to do. Until the trees started closing in around us and the rooftops disappeared behind the trees. And I'll never forget how steady and terrified his whisper was, and said, "There's something wrong with these two. Run." Insisting we follow them, ignoring every red flag in my head, and I could feel it trembling, thinking only about cold soda and how easy this was going to be. The strangers turned and began walking. Julian's hand gripped mine tighter with every step. The forest was just ahead of us now, and I saw nothing that even looked like a mint field. No scent in the air, no green leaves on the ground, just the same rough trail and the thick shadows between trees. I tried asking where exactly we were going, but the boys only gave vague answers, like it's just ahead, or be patient, we're almost there. And something about their tone felt wrong. I slowed my steps, then Julian leaned in close to my ear, and then, without a word more, he took off. He sprinted downhill, with my hand still in his, pulling me with everything he had. Behind us, I heard the boys shouting. I was crying, gasping, stumbling, and somehow I never fell. But we ran for what felt like miles. By the time we stumbled into the village, we were drenched in sweat, pale as ghosts. She brought us inside and gave us chocolate. Trying to calm us down, he said that he had wanted to go with the boys, and I didn't want to. She scolded him gently and told his parents. As for me, I couldn't stop shaking for days. I still don't know who those boys were or what they wanted, but now, as a teenager with clearer eyes and a sharper mind, and I don't like thinking about how close they got. Had Julian not been there, had I not trusted him? After my divorce, with no one to turn to and nowhere else to stay, I packed up what little I had and drove out to a small, quiet town in Alabama called Chatham, who had passed a few years earlier. Doors that stuck when you opened them, and a constant chill in the air, no matter how high you turned up the thermostat. But it was free, and at that point, that was good enough for me. Leaving behind a lonely house on 10 wide acres, surrounded by dense woods and complete silence, A place that felt isolated, yet oddly comforting at the time, and tried to tell myself it was probably just a drunk neighbor stumbling through the woods, or maybe a hunter heading home too late. A place that seemed far enough away from my old life to start something new, or at least try to forget. But the whistling returned every single night, always around 1:17 a.m. Give or take a minute, like clockwork, and an older deputy, I'll call him Deputy H, came out to see me. He'd been around for years, maybe even knew my grandfather. He went quiet, really quiet, and after a long pause, and keep the windows shut after dark. Good advice, though I was already doing all of that. He said something that made my blood run cold. Your granddaddy used to call us about the same thing. Said someone was whistling outside the house at night, practically breathing on the boards. Always in the spring. The only roof I could call my own belonged to my late grandfather. Like someone was in the crawlspace, whistling up through the vents, whispering that tune straight into the floor beneath my bed. It wasn't much to look at. Creaky wooden floors. For the first few days, I settled in quietly, and at the time, he just assumed my grandfather was getting old and paranoid. But now that I was hearing it, too, it came from the front porch. 3 long whistles, and then dead silence. Not a single creak or step afterward. It seemed like there was something more to it, something real. Unpacking boxes, fixing up what I could, and kept the porch light on all night, but none of it helped. The whistling kept getting closer, inch by inch, night after night, letting the sound of rustling leaves and distant owls slowly replace the noise in my head. Searched the yard, calling out into the dark, but there was no one there. No movement, no footprints in the dirt. Only the sound of the whistling fading back into the woods, like it had never been there at all. Like someone was walking through the woods alone, whistling to themselves for no reason at all. And every note seemed to hang in the air a little too long. But everything changed on the 7th night. Just after midnight, I had barely closed my eyes when I heard it. A strange, slow whistling drifting in from the trees behind the house at exactly the same time. Except this time, it was closer, playing a broken tune that didn't belong to any song I knew. It was off-key and unsettling. I sat there in bed, listening, heart beating faster. But the next night, it happened again. Exactly the same tune. I got up, turned on the porch light, stepped out with my flashlight. I tried to ignore it, thinking maybe it would stop on its own. Eventually, I called the sheriff's office. When I told him what had been happening, he told me they'd never found anything. He told me to stay inside, lock the doors. I even started placing chairs under the doorknobs, double-checked the locks before sunset one night. I heard it right behind the shed, sharp and loud, like the whistler was standing just on the other side of the wall. Another night. But the night that scared me the most was the one when I heard it coming from under the house.